Hello, this is Cindy Steiner of Steiner International Communications, and have the pleasure today of speaking with Marne Platt of Fundamental Capabilities. Marne has been a veterinarian, a senior executive in the pharmaceutical industry, an author, and is now transitioning into her own private practice as a full-time editor. She's committed to helping people reach their dreams. So, Marne, it's so nice to have you here today.
Hi, Cindy. It's nice to be here.
Well, now we've been working together, the two of us, just since 2016. And I know before that you had quite an interesting career history. You transitioned from veterinarian in New York to senior executive in big pharma in Switzerland.
Yep.
So can you share with us how and why this transition happened?
Absolutely. It was in many ways accidental. I think I became a career pivoter before we had that term. So it all started when I was a very little girl and I knew that I wanted to become a veterinarian. But I also knew how difficult it was. And so I had a bit of a backup plan, and that was to become an editor. But through a bit of hard work and a bit of luck, I was one of the fortunate ones to get into veterinary school and then actually become a practicing veterinarian. And I absolutely adored clinical practice. It was great until several years into it, my allergies just got out of hand and I had to leave practice. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I ended up working in the pharmaceutical industry, and no one was more surprised than I was at how well I took to it, because it's a completely different environment. But I ended up progressing my career and moving from country to country, from function to function, and as you said, rising quite high in management and getting pretty close to the top in the company, and then looking around and saying, you know, I've kind of done that. So that wasn't very long ago at all, and I have taken advantage of some opportunities to move away from that, and that's the transition now. And as I said, I've come full circle because now I'm going back to that idea of editing that was mine as a child, was my backup. So there is a flow to it, but it's not what I would have expected my career to be.
Mm-hmm. Very right. So true, so often that many of us end up somewhere that we never planned on starting out.
Very true.
Now, most of our work together is with women, helping them develop the skills to compete in what's basically still pretty much a male-dominated industry. So what would you say from your corporate experience are about maybe 2 or 3 of the pitfalls that these women fall into?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. You're right. The pharmaceutical business, and I think any big corporation, is still quite male normed. And in my coaching that I do either with people in other businesses, and I also coached quite extensively the women in my teams and in my companies, I think 3 of the big topics that I found coming up a lot were what I call, one, the tiara syndrome or the princess syndrome. 2 was the idea of sponsorship, and 3 was politics. And for each of those, I'll give you a little bit of what I mean. For example, for the tiara syndrome or the princess syndrome, that comes from the ideas in Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg's book, that for many women, we feel like if we just do our job really well, everyone will magically know, and someone will float a tiara or a crown down the hallway, plant it on our heads, and tell us that we are the queen of the business. And you know what? That just doesn't happen. And what needs to happen is that we need to talk about our accomplishments. And there's a fine line between doing that and bragging. And we find that many women are too quick to see that it's bragging, when in fact their male counterparts who are not bragging, there are plenty who are, but the ones who are not are just talking about their accomplishments in ways that we're not comfortable with. So I spend a lot of time talking about that. The second piece, the sponsorship, ties into that, in that we talk about mentors a lot. And you and I in our workshops do a section on the difference between mentors, sponsors, and advocates. And we say a mentor helps you skill up, an advocate will talk you up, but a sponsor is the one who helps you move up. And sponsorship is about being noticed by somebody who's in a position to do something to really move your career. And there are things we have to do to become noticed. So that's where, again, tiara syndrome will turn around and bite you in the rear end. But we also have an obligation as senior women to sponsor good women behind us. So I talk about that a lot. And the third piece that I hear this all the time from women. We say, I just can't be bothered with the politics. I am not going to play politics. And it sounds so noble. But the problem is, politics is just what happens when you have people with different goals within a business, and there's not enough resources to go around for everybody to meet their goals. So what we see expressed as political behavior is just the things people do to try and get those resources so they can reach their goals. And you and I talk about that in our workshops as well, in terms of having a two-dimensional framework that we populate with animals, because it helps people understand there are different ways to respond to those stressors. So I spend a lot of time with women talking about politics, talking about sponsorship, and the princess syndrome or the tiara syndrome.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. A different subject as author. The one book that, one of the first books I think that you wrote was called Living Singlish, which I love. I love that book. So I'm really curious, what inspired you to write that book? And also, what are maybe 2 or 3 of the takeaway messages from that book?
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you like it. I loved writing it. It started as a list for a younger friend and colleague who was about to move out on her own. Right? She was after university, and she had always either lived with her parents or in a dorm or moved into an apartment with a boyfriend. And she was about to get her first one and asked me to come shopping with her, shopping for the flat, and then asked me about all the things she needed to know. And we continued to talk, and I continued to write down for her things she would need to remember. And ultimately, she decided, not because of the list, but she decided that she wanted to go back to graduate school. So she moved back into a dorm, and I just kept writing. And the book became what I think of as an older sister you can carry in your pocket. So if you think back to what it was like when you were a young woman and you wanted to have this fabulous, exciting life, super fulfilling, you had all these dreams and goals, but you had a lot of questions and it was kind of embarrassing to ask them. Well, I wrote down as many of them as I could and as many of the answers as I could and put them in the book. So it's packed with good advice. And the idea behind it, it's called Living Singlish, as you said, and the idea is that you need this information if you are single, but also if you are not single, because if you are in a partnership, you are still a whole person and you need to be able to look after yourself. And so the principles that come out of the book are, first and foremost, you should know who you are and what you want, and by converse, who you're not going to be and what you don't want. And that helps you make decisions that you stick to. And there are 7 principles in the book, and some of them are things like have fun and celebrate your success. But the bottom line is it's your life and you get one shot at it. So live it like it's your life and don't live the life that somebody else meant you to have.
Great advice. Very good advice. And also a sense of humor.
Sorry?
Also a sense of humor in your book too. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. Try.
So now on your newest transition here, tell us a bit about your editing practice.
Yeah, so the editing practice, as I said, is going back to my second childhood dream. But the idea for me was that I have always loved words. You know, if I find a finely crafted sentence in a book, I will go back and read it 2 or 3 times just because I like the sentence so much. So I'm a bit of a word nerd. And I've always written and edited throughout my career, whether that was regulatory documents, medical documents, marketing documents, my own promotional and marketing materials, or things that I did for friends and colleagues who would quite often come to me and say, hey, can you look at my CV? Or I've just written my first novel, would you mind editing it? And I really enjoyed that. So I have focused now on building that. I am certified by the American Copy Editors Society and highly experienced in whether it's fiction or nonfiction, particularly medical technical documents, regulatory and development documents, but also CVs, websites, novels, short stories. I'm doing a short story anthology now for somebody, and I just love it. It's the right thing for me to be doing right now.
How exciting. That sounds pretty exciting. Yep. Another dream come true.
Yeah, why not? One life.
Yep. All right. Now tell me, looking back on your own career journey, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Ha. Yeah, I've thought about that from time to time, because in no way, shape, or form would I ever have guessed that this is what my life would look like. So I think I would tell my younger self two things. The first of those is to be a little bit braver. You know, in retrospect, my career sounds like I've made all of these amazing choices. And in truth, I didn't really get brave until my late 30s, early 40s. So some of the moves that happened not because I went after them, like leaving practice and going into industry, but because circumstances forced them. And I didn't really start to get brave and go after things that I wanted, like writing that book or going after different jobs and really actively climbing the ladder, until I was in my 40s. So the first piece is you can be braver a little younger. And the second piece is that it's okay if your goals changed. And they will change throughout your life. So when I was young, it was be a veterinarian. When I was in practice, it was be the best practitioner I could be and maybe go back and get trained as a soft tissue surgeon. And then when I got into industry, it evolved again to climbing that ladder. And then when I got up near the top of that ladder, I kind of looked around and thought, not my goal anymore. And that's okay. Your goals can change, and it is in no way, shape, or form a failure. It's just evolving yourself with your life experience.
Leaving those doors open.
Yeah, you never know what will not.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Marnie, for sharing your expertise. Are you currently accepting new clients? And if so, how can they reach you?
Yes, absolutely. I am always accepting clients into the editing practice and also select coaching clients as well. So people can find me on my website, www.fundamentalcapabilities.com. And on that website, they will find ways to reach me directly or sign up for mailing lists or find out more about the books, the editing services, and of course also the workshops that you and I do together.
Super. Great. Well, thanks again so much, Marnie. I've learned so much from working with you, and I encourage anyone out there who needs help to contact you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I learned from working with you too. It's always a pleasure.